They told Elena she'd miss it. That motherhood without sound would come with 1,000 tiny heartbreaks. She wouldn't hear her babies cry, would never hear mama for the first time, would miss the lullabies, the whispers, the laughter. They said silence would be her burden. But what they didn't know was that silence had made her stronger, more present, more attuned to the moments others take for granted. She felt her daughter's heartbeat against her chest, felt her breath, her movements, her moods. She didn't need ears to love. But one day, her daughter asked a question that shattered something deep inside. Mommy, do you hear me laugh? Elena had always believed love didn't need sound until she realized her daughter needed her to hear it. This is the story of a mother who crossed worlds to catch one sound, the sound that would change everything. Her daughter's first laugh. Elena was born into a world without sound, no cries, no lullabies, no bird song, just stillness. And while the world saw that as a loss, to her it was simply home. She learned early how to see conversations, how to read people by the way their eyes moved, the way their shoulders tightened, the way their lips danced with emotion. Where others relied on volume, Elena mastered vibration, rhythm, presence. In high school, she was the only deaf student in her class. Not the first, just the only one left. She adapted, but always felt one step removed, not because she couldn't understand, but because people didn't know how to include. Still, she smiled. She studied. She loved art. She made friends who spoke with their hands and hearts. Then in her 20s, she met Carlos. He didn't know sign language when they met, but he learned, clumsily at first, until his hands could say, I love you, with more honesty than his mouth ever could. They married and dreamed. And when they found out they were having a baby, Elena didn't feel afraid, at least not at first. But late at night, lying in bed, a quiet fear would stir. Would her child grow up feeling unheard, the way she once did? Elena read every article she could about raising hearing children as a deaf parent, about milestones she might miss, about sounds she couldn't explain. Still, she promised herself one thing: her baby would never feel unloved. Even if she never heard her child's voice, she would know every sigh, every giggle by heart. So when little Leah was born, Elena didn't listen for a cry. She waited for a heartbeat. And when that tiny chest rose and fell against hers, she wept, not for what she couldn't hear, but for everything she could finally feel. They spoke their own language from the start, cheeks pressed close, eyes locked, Elena signing lullabies only her daughter could see. But as Leah grew, so did the space between their worlds. And it was a single question, soft, unassuming, that would expose just how wide that space had become. By age 5, Leah had become a symphony of motion. She danced before she walked. She hummed before she spoke in full words. And laughter. Laughter was her favorite sound. Elena could feel it. The way her daughter's chest shook, the way her eyes sparkled, the way air vibrated through the floorboards when Leah ran through the house shrieking with joy. But Elena couldn't hear it. She told herself that didn't matter. She had never needed sound to be present. Love was still love, but children grow. And eventually, they start to notice what makes their world different from their parents'. It happened on a quiet afternoon. Leah was coloring on the floor, giggling at a cartoon. Elena sat nearby, reading her daughter's face the way she always did, smiling when she smiled, laughing silently in sync. Then Leah turned to her. eyes serious, voice small, and asked a question that fell like a stone in the room. "Mommy, do you hear me laugh?" Elena froze. Her hands, which had signed so many lullabies, suddenly didn't know what to do. She nodded, she smiled, but Leah tilted her head, like she could tell it wasn't the whole truth. And in that moment, Elena felt it. Not anger, not shame, distance, not the kind that comes from miles, but the kind that comes from unspoken differences, from a child reaching across the bridge to connect, and a mother afraid the bridge might not be strong enough. That night, Elena watched her daughter sleep, tiny fingers curled around a stuffed elephant. She thought of all the sounds Leah would grow up making, and all the ones she would never hear, not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't, or so she thought. Until a moment came, whispered between hope and fear, when Elena asked herself, what if I could? Not to fix something broken, but to meet her daughter in her world just once. Elena had never feared silence. It had always been her companion, faithful, familiar, grounded, but now there was something she feared more, the idea of her daughter feeling unseen, unheard by the one person meant to know her best. It wasn't about fixing herself. It wasn't about wanting to be like everyone else. It was about crossing the bridge, just once, to stand in her daughter's world and say, I hear you. So she began to research. She sat through consultations. She asked other deaf parents who had made similar choices, and finally, she considered something she'd never allowed herself to before, a cochlear implant. It was complicated, medically, emotionally. Her community was divided. Some felt it was a betrayal, as if choosing to hear meant rejecting the richness of deaf culture. But Elena wasn't rejecting anything. She was expanding, making room in her life for one more kind of connection, for one sound, one moment. Carlos, ever steady, held her hand through the appointments. He learned the new vocabulary, read the risks, and never once rushed her decision. And when Elena signed, I think I'm ready, he simply smiled and said, then so am I. Surgery came, recovery was slow, and then activation day. The room was quiet, too quiet. A single technician, a screen, and a small device. Elena sat with a mix of anticipation and grief. Would it work? Would it change her? Would her daughter still see her as the same mother? They flipped the switch, and at first, just static, distorted beeps, metallic echoes. But then, a door opened, footsteps. Leah's laughter didn't sound like a melody to Elena. Not at first. It was jumbled, tinny, like echoes underwater. But it felt like music. She didn't understand every word her daughter spoke. She still relied on lip reading, on signs, on touch. But now, there was texture. There was tone. There was something new anchoring their world. Sound. Elena found herself listening to everything. The rustle of bed sheets when Leah rolled over at night, the splash of water during bath time, the way Carlos's voice dropped when he said, I love you. It wasn't just about hearing, it was about being invited in. But more than anything, she listened for laughter, and it came in bursts of tickles, in silly dances after dinner, in whispered secrets between stories. Every time Leah laughed, Elena smiled a little deeper, because now she knew what joy sounded like. She began to document it, not in sound recordings, but in sketches, in journal entries, in signed poems. She once wrote, her laugh doesn't live in my ears, it lives in my bones. And now I carry it everywhere. And Leah noticed the way her mother leaned in, the way she laughed with her now, not just beside her. Their bedtime ritual changed. no longer just signs and touch, but giggles they both could hear, moments they could share not just in feeling, but in full sensation. Elena never became herein. She remained who she had always been, grounded, wise, beautifully deaf. But now she had one sound woven into her silence, one laugh, one love, one forever memory, and that sound, that tiny piece of joy, would never leave her. But Elena's story didn't end with her daughter, because when one woman dares to cross a bridge, others begin to follow. Elena's story wasn't one she told loudly. She never claimed the spotlight, never sought recognition, but those whose lives she touched, they remembered. And when asked about that moment, the first time she heard her daughter laugh, they didn't just describe a sound, they described a shift. Carlos, her husband, was the first to speak. He had walked beside her through the surgeries, the fears, the learning curve. Carlos said, "I didn't fall in love with a woman who needed to hear. I fell in love with a woman who saw everything, even what most people miss." But when she heard our daughter laugh, something opened in her, like her heart found a new room it never knew it had. Maya, a childhood friend and a fellow member of the deaf community, had her doubts at first. She feared Elena would lose herself or feel pressure to change. Maya said, "We grew up proud of who we were, and when Elena told me about the implant, I was scared. Scared she'd feel like she had to fix something, but what she did wasn't fixing, it was bridging. She stayed rooted in our world, but reached for her daughters too. And that's not betrayal, that's love." Leah's kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Parsons, remembered the day Elena came to pick Leah up from school, just days after activation. Mrs. Parsons said, "Leah ran up to her and laughed this huge belly laugh. I didn't think much of it until I saw Elena freeze. She heard it. And the way she looked at her daughter, you could tell it was the first time. I'll never forget that face, like someone hearing sunshine." Devin, a young mother in the community who followed Elena's blog, shared how that one story changed her own path. Devin said, "I was scared to have kids, scared my deafness would be a barrier. But then I read Elena's story about how love doesn't depend on sound, but how sometimes chasing one sound can deepen it. She made me believe I could be enough for a child, and now I'm expecting my first baby." 5 voices, 5 reflections, but the same truth echoed in them all. Elena didn't choose sound instead of silence. She chose love in every language. And in doing so, she gave others permission to redefine what connection can look like. Her choice rippled out, not just through the people around her, but through the quiet belief that no love is ever truly silent. Elena didn't wake up the next day with a new identity. She didn't suddenly crave the noise of the world. She still turned her implant off during thunderstorms. She still signed when words weren't enough. She still belonged deeply to the deaf community that shaped her. The truth is, hearing her daughter laugh didn't change who she was, but it did change how she loved. It opened a door not to a better version of motherhood, but to a more shared one. She began mentoring other deaf mothers, not to push them toward hearing, but to walk beside them as they explored their own bridges. She published a piece titled "The One Sound I Needed." It was passed hand to hand, screen to screen, translated, cited, whispered. And at home, life moved forward. Leah grew up knowing 2 languages, spoken and signed. She learned to express herself not just in words, but in rhythm, in pause, in presence. She learned from her mother that love doesn't always make a sound. but it always leaves a mark. On Leah's 7th birthday, she drew a picture of her family. When asked why her mom was holding an ear-shaped heart, she smiled and said, "Because that's how my laugh got inside her." Some sounds change nothing, some change everything. Elena's life was never silent. It was full of sight, of feeling, of meaning, but now it held one more frequency, one note she would carry forever, her daughter's joy. And when you ask her if it was worth it, the surgery, the risk, the noise, she always says the same thing. I didn't need to hear the whole world, I just needed to hear her. Some moments in life don't come with fanfare. They come quietly, like a giggle in the back seat, a sigh in a bedtime story, a single laugh that slips into your bones and stays. Elena didn't chase sound for herself. She chased it for connection, to meet her daughter where she was, to build a bridge, not to escape who she was, but to hold more of the people she loved. And in doing so, she reminded us of something simple but profound. The most powerful choices we make are often the ones no one hears. If you've ever felt like your version of love didn't fit the mold, if you've ever wondered if your way of showing up was enough, let this story be your reminder. Love speaks in many languages. And sometimes it laughs. Have you ever shared a moment like this, one that changed everything? We'd love to hear it in the comments. Your voice could be the reason someone feels seen today. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Able in Every Way. We create these stories to celebrate the quiet heroes among us, the ones who build bridges where others see walls. Because every laugh, every gesture, every step forward matters.